Ellie had planned a sweet dessert of strawberries and cream to enjoy in bed after a nice walk on the beach next to their rental cottage. It was a cool September evening, just a Friday away from celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary. Ellie was aware that her husband Will had secretly planned a Caribbean cruise for the following week. She wasn't supposed to know, but Will's best friend and business partner, Corey Parker, accidentally spilled the beans. She was especially excited about the romantic horseback rides on the beach they'd have at their stops, sure to be perfect for some alone time. Will and Corey met during their sophomore year at Duke University while studying business, becoming close friends and Sigma Chi fraternity brothers. After graduation, they started a tech company, helping high school juniors with their college search. With over 2.9 million students entering colleges annually in the U.S., they saw a significant market. 3 years in, they broke even, and by their 12th year, they each earned $250,000 after taxes and expenses. They continually improved their product using market research. Their goal was to be acquired by a major tech company within 3 years and then pursue a new venture. Will met Ellie in their second year after college in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he and Corey had set up their business. Ellie worked at a horse farm north of Charlotte. Will and Corey visited the farm with their team for an afternoon ride, where Will was immediately attracted to Ellie. After getting her phone number from a coworker, Will nervously waited 3 days before texting her. Ellie, who felt a connection during their ride, agreed to meet for coffee. 11 months later, they were married and honeymooned on horseback in the Maroon Bells near Aspen. Like many young couples, Will and Ellie's bed life had its ups and downs. They were comfortable with their bodies, but learning to satisfy each other and communicate their preferences took time. Corey, on the other hand, had a reputation as a womanizer. Ellie had set him up with a few of her friends, but after he ended things with each of them within a month or two, she decided to keep her friends away from him. Although she got along with Corey, she disapproved of his dating habits, finding them immature. Corey, standing at 6'2" with dark hair and deep brown eyes, was quite handsome and enjoyed the thrill of dating. Unlike Will, who was shorter with blonde hair and blue eyes, Corey quickly lost interest in women after the initial excitement. Ellie often scolded him for this behavior. "Corey, you can't just sleep with them and then move on," she said one day. "Sure I can, Elle," he replied. "I never promise love or commitment, and they're all consenting adults. Besides, if I ever meet someone like you, I might consider settling down." Turning to Will, he added, "Right, bro. Don't drag me into this," Will wisely responded, understanding his wife's expression. He just wanted to avoid any conflict. 9 months ago, Corey was close to his goal of sleeping with his business partner's wife, Ellie. Despite her annoyance with him, he saw it as part of the game. For years, he asked her to introduce him to her attractive single friends. She did, but regretted it as Corey ended these relationships quickly, which frustrated Ellie. Corey enjoyed closeness and used these brief relationships to gather information about Ellie. He was skilled at gaining women's trust and learning about Ellie through innocent questions. Corey knew he needed to be patient and took a long-term approach. He genuinely cared about his business partner, Will, and had no intention of hurting him. Their startup was thriving, and Corey valued their friendship and partnership. For Corey, it was all about the challenge, which he called the dance. He believed he could have any woman, single or married, with enough effort. Ellie was particularly appealing because she was stunning, intelligent, happily married, and disliked him. Corey had no plans to hurt Will. Once he won Ellie over, he would enjoy their affair for a while, and then persuade her to end it out of guilt. They would meet occasionally, and Will would never find out. Corey even planned to coach Ellie on how to satisfy Will better, ensuring everything would work out smoothly. For years, Corey tested Ellie's patience, infuriating her before apologizing profusely. Ellie would scold him and complain to Will, but Corey would soften her with his charming smile and small, thoughtful gifts like dark chocolate or a scarf. When she hugged him and said, "I still hate you, but you can be really nice when you try," he knew he was back in her good graces. In late January, Corey made a breakthrough. Before Christmas, he dated and slept with Joe, who worked with Ellie at the stables. Joe was adventurous and lively, and they quickly became intimate. Despite enjoying his time with Joe, Corey stayed focused on his true goal, Ellie. On January 23rd, Corey was at Will and Ellie's place for a day of football. While watching the AFC and NFC championship games, Ellie's phone rang. She answered and stepped out of the room, with Corey and Will hearing the first part of her conversation. "Hey, Joe, what's up?" "What? No way, he didn't do that." "Joe, calm down and tell me what happened." They then heard a chair in the kitchen being knocked over, and loud footsteps down the hall, followed by Ellie shouting, "That freaking jerk! I'm going to end him!" Then there was a loud slam. Will looked at Corey, knowing exactly what had happened. "Seriously, man? You broke another heart?" "I'm sorry, Will. I know this makes things tough for you and Ellie. But Joe just wasn't right for me, and I couldn't keep leading her on." "Corey, when are you going to grow up? Why don't you wait until you actually care about someone before you sleep with them? Watch some X movie or something if you need to, but keep your Johnson away from my wife's friends. Ellie gets mad at you for a while, then she's upset with me for at least a week. And that means no closeness for me. Man, I'm really sorry. I need to listen to you and get my act together. One of these days, she might really go off on me. Well, I don't own a Colt, but I can't promise she won't buy one." Did he just throw another interception? A few minutes later, Ellie stormed out of the bedroom and confronted Corey. "You're such an a-hole, Corey. You're such a freaking a-hole." "I'm sorry, Elle. Joe's a nice girl, but I just—" "Shut up, Corey. Joe isn't just a nice girl. She's one of my best friends. I told you not to mess with her feelings." "I know, Elle. Just shut up, Corey," Ellie yelled, getting more worked up. She grabbed a throw pillow from the couch and started hitting him with it. She was crying. "Every time you just use them and then throw them away." "Why, Corey? What do you want so badly that you can't just be decent to someone as amazing as Joe?" Corey managed to get up and move around the couch, trying to put some space between him and Ellie, who was hitting him with the pillow. It was just a pillow, but she was strong and hitting hard. She paused to catch her breath, so Corey quickly grabbed his jacket and headed for the front door. "Ellie, you're overreacting. I'm really sorry about Joe, but I think it's best if I leave now and let you cool off. Maybe we can talk when you're calmer." With that, he was almost out the door. "Calm down? Cool off?" she yelled, following him closely. "You screw over my friends and then tell me to calm down!" She threw the pillow as he shut the door to avoid her last attack. But Ellie was so worked up that she reopened the door and chased him down the sidewalk. Will sat on the couch, deciding it was better to stay out of this fight. "I'm not done with you, Corey Parker. Get your sorry self back here!" Ellie shouted as she followed him to his car. Corey had parked in front of their house, not in the driveway, and a hedge blocked the view from the house to the street. They were alone. Corey put his hands up in a surrendering gesture. "Okay, Ellie, just wait a minute," he said more calmly. "First, it's about 28 degrees out here, and you're barefoot and only wearing a t-shirt. You should go back inside before you freeze." He didn't want her to get sick from the cold, but he couldn't help but notice how her cold was. Her teeth were chattering, but she didn't stop. "Forget that, Parker." Then she started crying again. "Why, Corey? Why are you such a jerk to my friends and to women in general? What's your problem?" This was the moment Corey had been waiting for. He put on his most innocent look and replied, "Do you really want to know, Ellie? Are you sure you want me to tell you? Once I do, there's no going back." Ellie was a bit taken aback by his sudden vulnerability. She had always thought he was superficial, but now he was showing her a different, more intriguing side of himself. "Yes, Corey," she said more calmly. "Please, tell me." "Ellie, you're the reason I can't stay with any of the other women. I know you're married, and to my best friend no less. But whenever I'm with someone else, all I can think about is you. Your face is the only one I want to see. I'm sorry, Ellie, but I'm in love with you, and all I want is to be with you." "But Corey, we can't. I mean, I'm flattered, and I do care about you, but we can't do this." There's a thin line between anger and passion. Though she didn't realize it at the moment, Corey was about to push her past that line, and she would go willingly. He didn't let her finish her sentence. He pulled her into his strong arms, looking at her with a mix of warmth and desire, and kissed her deeply. One hand was behind her head, the other around her waist. He knew this was the decisive moment. She would either slap him and go back inside, ending the chance of anything happening, or she would respond to his kiss. She didn't resist, but she also didn't fully give in. "Oh no, what have I done?" Ellie murmured, barely audible. They kissed for a while longer before Ellie pulled away. "Corey, please, I can't do this, not here and not now." What she didn't say was, "not ever." Corey realized he had pushed things as far as he could for now. "Ellie, I won't say I'm sorry because I'm not. I don't want to hurt Will, but you're incredible. I'm going to leave now, but promise me we can meet up later this week to talk things over. Just talk at a coffee shop. Nothing more, I promise." "I don't know, Corey, maybe." Her voice trailed off. "Go inside, Ellie. It's freezing out here, and Will be out soon if you don't head back inside." He kissed her one last time with passion, and she kissed him back. They ended the kiss, he got into his car, and she went back inside, smoothing her hair and adjusting her t-shirt to hide any signs of what had happened. When she got inside, Will was standing by the table, looking nervous. "I'm sorry, Ellie. I know he can be a jerk. Maybe I should think about leaving the business and doing something else, something that doesn't involve Corey. My husband is so loving and kind," she thought to herself. "No, sweetheart, I'm just upset. I'm going to take a hot bath and have a glass of wine. Let me relax for a bit, then come upstairs and hold me, okay?" Will, being loving and kind, was completely unaware that everything was about to change for the worse. He had always trusted her and had no reason to doubt her loyalty. "Of course, babe. Just take your bath and call me when you're ready and I'll come up." Ellie took a long bath while Corey went home, showered, and collapsed on his bed. Later, Ellie called for Will to come upstairs and comfort her. Unaware of her deceit, he happily joined her. 2 days later at 10:30 a.m., Corey and Ellie sat together at their local coffee shop. Ellie had told Will that morning she needed to have a calm but honest talk with Corey. "I need to clear the air," she told her husband. She wasn't sure what she wanted to do yet. It was all so confusing, but she knew she had to tell Will. If he found out about their meeting on his own, he might have been suspicious. "Corey, this can't continue," Ellie started. It was clear she was still unsure. "Ellie, I would never pressure you into anything, but I felt what happened on Sunday night. Yes, I kissed you first, but then we kissed. We touched each other. We were passionate together. I know, Corey. Something snapped in me and I was drawn in. But I love Will and will not hurt him with lies and cheating. You need to understand that. I don't want to hurt my friend, Ellie, but that doesn't mean I've decided not to be with you. It can be our little secret. You know I'm not the marrying kind. As incredible as you are, I have no intention of trying to take you away from him. I don't think I could even if I wanted to. But don't you want to enjoy this moment? Don't you want to let yourself go and experience the pleasure we could have together? But Will, we can have this, and make sure Will never finds out. We both know it won't last forever. The most intense things burn out quickly. A few discrete months, maybe a year at most, and it will be over. But we will have the memories of an incredible experience with an amazing person for the rest of our lives." He could see that she was starting to soften. "I know it would be incredible, Corey. But how can we be sure this won't ruin my marriage to the man I want to spend my life with? People get caught because they're careless and not smart. We're neither of those things, so I'm sure we can keep this from causing any problems." "No, I don't think so," she replied firmly as she stood up and left the coffee shop. She was resolute in her decision as she walked to her car, but talking to him had made her feel excited. Corey wasn't discouraged. He knew Ellie had crossed a line and wouldn't go back. He planned his next steps, grabbed coffee for Will, and returned to the office ready to lie about Ellie giving him a hard time. Within a week, an opportunity arose. Will had to drive to Winston-Salem for a meeting, leaving Ellie with a free evening. She went for a ride after work and came home cold and turned on. After a shower, she put on a robe, relaxed by the fire with wine, and flirted with Will on the phone while pleasuring herself. A soft knock on the back door revealed Corey holding a bottle of wine. Feeling an immediate arousal, Ellie opened the door and passionately kissed him. Corey picked her up and carried her to her marital bed. She did nothing to resist, and they quickly became intimate. Ellie challenged him to leave, but it only spurred Corey on. He loved her resistance and quickly overpowered her, kissing her deeply. After 2 hours and another shower, they held each other and fell asleep. Just before drifting off, Ellie thought about Will. Corey set his phone alarm for 6:30 a.m. He made coffee while Ellie slept, thinking about their situation and the need for caution. He wondered if a short affair would be enough with Ellie, who challenged and fascinated him. Ellie woke to the smell of coffee and joined Corey. After a quiet chat, they returned to the kitchen for more coffee, but quickly became intimate again. 2 hours later, after washing the sheets, Corey went to the office as Will was heading home. Ellie knew Will would want to be intimate that night and hoped he would reclaim her. She planned to continue seeing Corey, convinced she could keep her lives separate and enjoy both. "I love Will, and I won't ever stop," she told herself, refusing to see her actions as wrong. She didn't question how she could love and stay loyal to Will while committing adultery with his business partner. Over the next 8 months, Corey and Ellie met weekly in various locations, never the same place twice, and often at times when their activities were hard to detect. They used hotels every third meeting, with Corey claiming the expenses as business trips. Ellie told Will she had to check on a horse or visit a competing stable. Following Corey's advice, Ellie remained affectionate with Will, who trusted both of them and never suspected a thing. When Will mentioned to Corey in August that he planned to surprise Ellie with a Caribbean cruise for their 10th anniversary in September, Corey decided he'd try to arrange a weekend getaway with Ellie a week or two before that. He knew Ellie was starting to worry they were pushing their luck. Corey wasn't losing interest in Ellie, but was determined to keep his betrayal from Will. Maybe this would be their last fling. Maybe. Recently, back in Charleston, Corey gave Ellie one last kiss before heading to the outdoor shower near the master bedroom, knowing their night would be unforgettable. They never mentioned feeling guilty about the deceitful game they were playing. A few minutes later, Ellie reached around him, grabbing and stimulating him. "Dinner can wait a few minutes," she whispered in his ear. Her cell phone rang, but she ignored it, which turned out to be a huge mistake because cheaters often slip up eventually. A few minutes later, 3 hours north of Charleston, Will Benton was enjoying some Chinese takeout when his cell phone rang. The area code was 843. Will, familiar with many area codes due to their business, recognized it as Charleston. He thought, Charleston? He didn't usually get client calls on his cell phone and didn't recall any close friends in that area. "Hello? Hi, this is Gemma Hartnell. I'm trying to reach Ellie Benton." "You're close. This is her husband, Will. Can I help with something?" "I'm sorry to bother you while you're on vacation, Mr. Benton. Mrs. Benton was with us today on Kiowa Island, and it looks like her wallet might have fallen out of her purse when she left. She probably hasn't realized it's missing, or she would have come back. We tried her cell number from the reservation, but didn't get an answer. This was the only other number we could find in her wallet, so I decided to call it. I'm glad I reached you." Before she could continue, Will interrupted. "You said Ellie Benton, right?" "Yes, that's right. Can you confirm her address from her driver's license?" "Sure, just a moment. 1810 Falling Leaf Drive." "That's our address, but there must be a mistake. Ellie is supposed to be at a horse show in Lexington, Kentucky this weekend." Will felt his hands start to sweat. "I'm sorry, sir," the young woman said, sounding nervous. Gemma was also getting anxious, unsure of the situation and eager to end the call. "If you talk to her, please let her know we have her wallet at Seabrook Stables." "Yes, I'll tell her," Will said, trying to make sense of the situation. "I'll let her know. She'll probably come by to pick it up this evening or tomorrow." Will ended the call and went to his laptop. He opened it to check the itinerary Ellie had given him. She had left early that morning and was supposed to return on Sunday evening. At the top of the page, he read, "Champagne Run Jumper Stumpers, Lexington, Kentucky, September 10th, 12. That was this weekend, so apparently Ellie wasn't there. What was she doing in Charleston or Kiowa Island? He wondered aloud. Why would she lie to me about this? There must be some reasonable explanation. Will took a moment to work through his options. She might be planning a surprise for them later in the fall, but she could do all of that from her laptop. She couldn't be setting up something for their anniversary because he had already mentioned he was planning a surprise. Was there a horse show in Charleston this weekend? Maybe she changed her plans at the last minute and didn't tell him because she didn't want him to think she was unreliable. He quickly checked the Charleston Visitors website for any horse-related events, but found nothing. Could she be attending something with her sorority sisters that she didn't want to tell him about? But why would that be a secret? He wouldn't mind if she went on a girls' weekend. None of these or other possibilities made sense. Then he considered the last idea he didn't want to think about, but felt he had no choice. Is she having an affair? The thought gave him a lump in his throat and a knot in his stomach. Nothing else seemed to fit. He had thought he married the most wonderful woman, beautiful, smart, talented, and loyal. What should he do? He needed to think things through, but also needed to calm down. He decided to call someone who might help him. Corey. He started to dial Corey's number, but suddenly stopped. Oh no, he realized, starting to piece together something he hoped wasn't true. Corey was supposed to be in Florida visiting his family this weekend, right? He checked his contacts and called Marty Parker instead. Will, what a surprise. I hope you and my son are still out there conquering the world. Hi, Marty. I'm trying to reach Corey. His cell goes to voicemail. He lied. He told me he was visiting you and Vera this weekend. It's not urgent, just a quick question. Is he around? I think you might be mistaken, Will, Marty said. Corey mentioned he'd be in Hilton Head this weekend with some fraternity friends. Do you want me to try to get in touch with him? Will struggled to stay calm. No problem, Marty. I must have mixed up the weekends. I left him a message, and I'm sure he'll call me back. Say hi to Vera for me, he said quickly before ending the call. This can't be happening, Will thought, trying to reason with himself. Not his best friend and his wife. Please let this not be true. He spent an hour trying to stay calm. Should he fly out and confront them? Without knowing their location, that was unrealistic. Should he wait and ask Ellie? If she was lying, she'd cover her tracks. Ellie wasn't dumb. After an hour, he searched North Carolina divorce laws. No-fault divorces were allowed, and with no kids, there was no child support issue, but alimony was different. Would Ellie ask for half his share of the company? If she and Corey ended up with the majority, they could push him out. Was that their plan all along? He also looked into divorces with fault. Adultery was a reason, but proving it was difficult. All he had was a call from a riding stable. If Ellie and Corey were having an affair, he was in trouble. Will could walk away from the money. It wasn't that important. He had skills and had built a successful company. He could find another job or start a new business. He knew he couldn't play detective for months or pretend to be a loving husband while a private investigator did the work. Realizing he was getting nowhere, he took 3 Tylenol PM tablets, set his alarm for 8 a.m., and went to bed. After 30 minutes of tears, the medication took effect. Past midnight in Charleston, Corey and Ellie sat on the porch after a fantastic dinner, a moonlit beach walk, and hours of intense act. The first hour was rough and aggressive. After their walk, Ellie drew a bath and told Corey to wait in the bed. Corey tried to be patient, but couldn't hold back. He entered the bathroom with a grin. "No more waiting," he growled, pulling her onto him. Ellie would never have accepted this from Will, but Corey's aggressive desires drove her wild. She loved how he took control and wanted her so intensely. Although she knew he had other women, he always seemed to want her more, giving her a twisted sense of pride. A short while later, they moved their activities to the bedroom. 15 minutes after that, they were sitting on the porch, quietly talking and basking in the afterglow of their time together. "What are we doing, Corey?" "What do you mean, babe? It seems like you're pretty familiar with what we've been doing." "Not that, smartass," she said, giving him a light punch on the shoulder. "Why are we doing this? We've been together for over 8 months now. You have plenty of other women, and I have a husband that I love." The last word was hard for her to say. She felt she did love her husband deeply, but it felt hard to say that sincerely, given where she was and what she was doing. Corey knew better than to make light of her feelings for Will. Honestly, he felt some guilt when she mentioned his name. He had known Will almost 7 years longer than he had known Ellie. They spent 8, 10 hours a day together, working and planning. With no siblings of his own, Will was like family to him. "I don't know, Ellie. I just can't keep my mind or my hands off you. I care about Will, too. But you captivate me, and I need you." "Maybe you just can't stand Will having something you can't have." "Maybe. We have this weekend, and then Will and I leave for the cruise on Tuesday. He can never, ever suspect us. You drive me wild, and I love closeness. But I want my life with Will as my husband, and hopefully soon, the father of my kids. I hope you're not saying this weekend will be our last time together." "I'm not sure, but no. I don't think I'm saying that. I don't think I could just stop seeing you cold turkey. Don't get too big of an ego, but you always make me feel amazing when we're together." Corey glanced at her, then at his own lap, and back at her with a grin. "It's a bit late to tell me not to get a big head." He then stood up, picked her up in his arms, and carried her to the bed. For a brief moment, he wondered if this might not be their last encounter before they gave in to their desires once more. At 8 a.m., Will Benton got out of bed, still groggy from sleeping pills. He took a cold shower, made coffee, and finalized a plan. He called Sterling private investigators and was assured a callback within 30 minutes. "Mr. Benton, this is Amanda Cunningham. How can I help you?" Will explained his situation. "No problem, Mr. Benton. With your 50% deposit, our team will find them and figure out what they're up to. We have over 30 years of combined experience in surveillance and covert operations. I'll know where they are within an hour." After a 15-minute conversation, Will transferred the $6,000 deposit. Amanda promised an update by noon. Meanwhile, Ellie checked her voicemail and realized she had forgotten to call Will. She called him from the Mustang while Corey drove her to Kiowa to retrieve her wallet. Her call went to voicemail, so she left a sweet but misleading message about horses and a poor breakfast at the North Lexington Courtyard Marriott. She assured him she was excited about their 10th anniversary next week. When they arrived at Seabrook, Ellie quickly picked up her wallet. Without hearing about Gemma's call to Will, they decided to shop on King Street and have lunch at slightly north of Broad. While waiting for Amanda and her team to work, Will contacted Ed Simmons, a top lawyer and longtime friend of his father. Ed was about to start a round of golf, but immediately left for Will's house after their 5-minute conversation. Ed and Will spent 90 minutes reviewing the details and discussing options. Ed suspected Ellie was likely cheating with Corey. At 11:57 a.m., Amanda called with an update. Ellie was in town and had ridden at Seabrook the previous day. That morning, she and a man matching Corey Parker's description, in a red Mustang, had picked up her wallet at Seabrook. The car was rented by Corey, listing a private cottage on the far north end of Folly Island as the address. The couple spent 2 hours shopping on King Street and were currently having lunch at Snob. Surveillance equipment and recording devices were being set up at the cottage while they were out. "How the heck did you find all that out so fast?" Will asked. Before Amanda could respond, Ed joined the conversation. Ed Simmons, Will's lawyer, called Amanda Cunningham. He informed her that they would need to follow certain protocols and asked to record the conversation. They then discussed the plan, impressing Will with their collaboration. Amanda offered suggestions, and Ed accepted several of her ideas. After finishing the call, Ed asked Will whether he wanted to fix things with Ellie or pursue a divorce, emphasizing the urgency of the situation. Will, feeling clear-cut about his decision, stated that Ellie and his business partner had both betrayed him and their marriage and business. He wanted them both out of his life as soon as possible, regardless of the cost, and wanted them to experience the pain he was feeling. As he spoke, tears welled up in his eyes. Ed put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "All right, Will. If Amanda and her team find what we expect, here's what you need to do." By noon on Sunday, Ellie was getting anxious. She had called Will 5 times, 3 times on Saturday and twice on Sunday morning. All she got back was a brief and somewhat cold text. "Busy with a crisis. We'll talk Sunday night. Enjoy Lexington." She showed the text to Corey and asked him to call Will to find out what was wrong. She assumed it was a business issue, but wondered, could he have found out? "How am I supposed to call him, Ellie?" Corey replied. "He hasn't contacted me about any office problems. If I call, what do I say?" "Hey, Will, Ellie and I are in Charleston having a great time, but she thinks there might be an issue at work, so she asked me to check in with you." "Yeah, you're right. I'm not thinking clearly," Ellie admitted. "It must be a work issue. There's no way he could have figured things out. You told him you were visiting your family this weekend, so maybe he doesn't want to bother you." "Yeah, that's probably it," Corey agreed, though he didn't sound very convinced. They took a shower together before heading to the airport, trying to make love. But Corey noticed Ellie's mind was elsewhere in Charlotte, so he didn't push it. He thought to himself, there'll be plenty more of this when we get back, and if nothing's wrong, I'll have plenty of time with her. 3 minutes after they left the cottage, an AT&T van arrived. 2 technicians went into the house to remove their equipment. 30 minutes later, Amanda and her team were reviewing the recordings. After an hour, one of the technicians remarked, "Wow, they really have a lot of energy." Corey dropped Ellie off at curbside check-in and then went to return the rental car. His phone rang as he was leaving, and it was his dad. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" "Just checking in, son. Hope you're enjoying Hilton Head." "Yeah, we're playing a lot of golf and eating great seafood, even though my game isn't perfect." "How are you and Mom?" "We're good, but Will called me on Friday evening looking for you. He thought you were visiting us this weekend, which was odd because he usually doesn't make mistakes like that. Is everything all right with him?" Corey's heart skipped a beat, but he tried to sound casual. "Will's been a bit stressed lately. He and Ellie are thinking about starting a family, and he's worried about it. I'm sure he just mixed up the dates. I'm still planning to visit in 3 weeks." Corey decided not to mention this to Ellie. "It's probably nothing, and I don't want to worry her before her flight home." They flew on separate flights to avoid issues, and both arrived on time. Ellie, with only a carry-on, went straight to her car and drove home, calming down during the 25-minute drive. Traffic was light, and she got home quickly, eager to see Will and ensure her secret was safe. She planned to act tired from the weekend and be affectionate. However, she never got the chance. When Ellie pulled into the driveway, her garage remote didn't work. She assumed it was a dead battery. Noticing the house was dark except for the porch light, she walked to the front door. An envelope with her name was taped to it. She tried to unlock the door, but the key wouldn't turn. She started to feel scared. Sitting on the porch, she opened the envelope and began to cry as she read the note. "Mrs. Benton, your husband, Will Benton, has hired me as his lawyer. He knows about your affair with his business partner, Corey Parker. You were not in Lexington, Kentucky, but in Charleston, South Carolina with Mr. Parker. Mr. Benton has changed the locks. Since the mortgage is in his name, you cannot enter without his permission. Find somewhere else to stay for now. Do not contact Mr. Benton directly. He will reach out through my office to discuss separation and divorce. You may collect your personal items from the house under supervision, possibly starting tomorrow morning. Arrange this through me. I suggest you get your own lawyer. When you do, provide them with my contact details. Funds are available in your joint account for immediate expenses. Use your Bank of America debit card. All joint credit cards have been canceled. You might consider asking Mr. Parker for a place to stay. Ellie took a few minutes to compose herself. Despite the letter's instructions, she tried calling Will several times. Within 5 minutes, she received a text from Ed Simmons insisting she follow the request not to contact Will directly. Ellie felt overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Corey Parker used his keys to enter his condo and found a note from Simmons. Mr. Parker, my client, Mr. Benton, has discovered your affair with his wife, constituting adultery. A preliminary audit revealed company funds were used for meetings between you and Mrs. Benton. To avoid criminal and civil charges, Mr. Benton wants to discuss ending your partnership and buying your 50% share of the company. Seek legal and financial advice. Do not contact Mr. Benton directly or face immediate legal action. Corey cursed himself, realizing he had used company funds for their meetings, listing them as client business entertainment. He'd even sent $1,000 for reimbursement just last weekend. The recent audit had shown no issues, but the auditor could spot a pattern. Corey spent the rest of the night drinking bourbon, trying to figure out his next steps. Ellie called and texted Corey over a dozen times that evening, but he ignored them. I have huge problems of my own. Handle your issues and leave me alone, he thought, realizing how quickly a relationship based on lust can fall apart. Ellie sat on her porch, stunned. Her husband knew more than she thought, and Corey was ignoring her. I guess that shows me where I stand with him, she thought. Tears flowed as she realized Corey wouldn't risk anything for her, unlike her husband who would do anything for her. Meanwhile, at Ed Simmons' residence, Will and Ed were finalizing their plans. Will felt confident he had hired the right person. Ed had brought in another senior partner, 2 junior attorneys, and a paralegal on a Sunday night to plan their strategy. Will thought, this is going to cost a lot of money, but smiled, thinking, it's worth it to get rid of that cheating wife. Ed reassured Will that Ellie and Corey would likely hire their own lawyers soon. He anticipated their initial responses would be denial or attempts to minimize the damage. He advised Will to stick to his regular work routine and be patient. I probably won't have much information until midweek, so go to work, keep a low profile, and avoid talking to strangers. And no matter what, never take candy from anyone in a sketchy van. Simmons chuckled, gave Will a big bear hug, and said, don't worry, you're in good hands. Will wasn't sure if he could go home, fearing Ellie might be waiting to confront him. Ed reassured him with a grin, explaining how one of his guys had told Ellie to leave since she was trespassing. When she claimed it was her home, he pretended to call the police, and she left quickly. Will smiled sadly. In the following days, Will followed his lawyer's advice closely. By Tuesday, he changed his cell phone number because Ellie kept trying to contact him. At work, Corey stayed home on his lawyer's advice. Will told his team they were having disagreements but were working through them, asking them to treat Corey as a partner for now. Ellie remained distracted at the stables, and her boss, Stephanie, noticed. Ellie mentioned she and Will were having problems, but didn't elaborate. Stephanie offered her support. Ellie struggled to find a good lawyer. The first 2 she consulted turned her down due to the likely small payout. She ended up with Seth Moore, known for chasing ambulance cases. He promised to get her a large settlement but had ulterior motives. Neither Seth Moore nor Corey's lawyer, James Abernathy, had much time. Ed Simmons, a well-regarded lawyer with strong connections, pushed for a speedy hearing right after Ellie was served 2 days after returning home. Abernathy knew he was up against a tough opponent. Even though he realized dragging this out for months or years wasn't feasible for his client due to financial constraints, he advised Corey to offer to sell his share of the business at a reduced price that would help him cover his expenses and pay his legal fees. Corey agreed to offer to sell his share at 80 cents on the dollar. Simmons got the sale proposal and suggested that Will should counter with an offer of 10 cents on the dollar. We'll probably settle somewhere around 30 cents. I know Abernathy well. Even though he understands the situation, he'll still be a tough negotiator. Will wanted to make Corey suffer. Offering 10 cents on the dollar would nearly wipe out Corey financially, which seemed fair to him. However, Will knew he had to follow his lawyer's advice. If they managed to get 30 cents on the dollar, it would still hurt Corey significantly, so he decided to leave the rest to chance or deal with it later. 3 days later, Ed made a deal for Will. We settled at 28 cents on the dollar, he told Will on the phone. It's not as harsh as you wanted, but it's still a big win for you. Will expressed his gratitude. Ed then brought up a more difficult issue. Will, you need to sit down and talk with Ellie. A judge will want to see that you've made an effort to communicate with her, even if you're heading toward divorce. It's always better to have answers ready before a judge asks questions. We've assigned Judge Kim Landis to our case, Ed continued. She can be strict about trying to resolve issues, and she might even require counseling. I won't go into all the details now, but it's time to have that conversation. I'll arrange it for you. We'll start with a counselor present, but it would be smart for you to also have a private talk with her. Show that you can remain calm and respectful despite the situation. It will help your case to demonstrate that you're reasonable. Will sighed, knowing Ed was right but dreading the conversation. Okay, Ed, arrange it. Ed sympathized with Will, remembering his own heartbreak during the first Gulf War when his partner Becky left him. He believed Will would eventually be okay, but it wasn't the right time to mention that. Ed's focus was to support him and make sure he didn't feel alone. The meeting was scheduled for mid-afternoon on Friday. Ed wanted Will to have the weekend to recover from the difficult conversation. They planned to spend the first 30 minutes with their lawyers present, and then Will and Ellie would have some time alone. Ellie and her lawyer, Seth Moore, arrived on time. Seth wore a standard suit, likely from J.C. Ellie wore a simple light blue sundress with a burgundy sweater, her hair in a ponytail, and Michael Kors glasses. Ed and Will stood as they entered the private conference room at Simmons, and Wyckoff. The room was secluded, requiring navigation through several lobbies and hallways to emphasize the seriousness of the situation. Ed knew Seth's office was modest, with part-time staff. Will, still in love with Ellie, felt a lump in his throat seeing her. Despite her betrayal, she looked beautiful to him. He gave her a polite smile but avoided any affectionate looks. "It's good to see you, Will," Ellie said, studying him closely, possibly trying to see if there was still any love in his heart for her. Will nodded and replied, "Ellie, thank you for coming." Ed kept a neutral expression but thought to himself, "Good job, stay calm and don't let her see anything." "Shall we get started?" he asked, signaling everyone to take a seat. "Yes, thank you," Seth interjected, perhaps hoping to gain an advantage. "My client is here to see what her husband is willing to do to save their marriage." Ed interrupted by pulling out a thick file from the end of the table and sliding it over to Seth. "What's this?" Seth asked, surprised. "I didn't think we were supposed to handle documents today." "Counselor," Ed said, wanting to move past Seth quickly. "This file contains about half of our evidence proving your client's adultery and broken marriage vows. We've left out any redundant information. Inside, you'll find recordings and photos of her activities in Charleston, South Carolina from 3 weeks ago. We also have hotel staff witnesses who saw your client and Mr. Corey Parker checking in as a married couple using fake names. These incidents happened over a 6-month period. Our investigators have been very thorough, and the evidence is clear and undeniable. Given the explicit nature of the photos, I suggest you review them after the meeting." Ellie winced as Ed described the file's contents. The thought of him having seen pictures of her intimate moments made her uncomfortable. He maintained a polite smile. What had once seemed thrilling and romantic now felt like a betrayal of a loving and good man. She struggled to keep her composure. Ed pushed a second file across the table. This one was much thinner, containing only 2 pages. "Counselor, this is Mr. Benton's offer for the divorce settlement," he said. Looking directly at Ellie, he added, "Personally, I think the terms are more than fair. If it were up to me, I'd want to present all the evidence to the judge to show the full extent of Mrs. Benton's premeditated betrayal. However, Mr. Benton, being a decent man, has asked me to make this offer instead." Ed's experience in legal matters was clearly working in his favor. Ellie looked beaten down, and Seth Moore seemed out of his depth. Ed knew they wouldn't reach a settlement today. The first court hearing was 2 weeks away, and there would be more negotiations before they went in front of a judge. Will's offer was tough under the circumstances, but reasonable given his wife's betrayal. Will offered a one-time payment of $75,000 in exchange for Ellie agreeing that he would be the sole owner of the company forever. She would give up any future claims. They would split the proceeds from selling the house, which wouldn't be much since they'd only lived there 5 years. Each might get around $10,000. Ellie could keep her car but would need to start paying for it herself a month after the divorce. Ellie could take any furniture she wanted from the house, except for their marriage bed and a set of antique rocking chairs from Will's grandmother. Will planned to burn the bed in the backyard before moving out, which he eventually did. Ellie could keep all the jewelry Will had bought her, except for the engagement and wedding rings. Those must be returned by the day the divorce is finalized. Ellie had to agree that the divorce was based on her infidelity. There was an extra page with more details about the agreement, but the main points were clear and straightforward. My client and I will review this offer and respond with our counteroffer by early next week, Miller said, trying to sound like his client was in the right. However, I can tell you that Mrs. Benton will not agree to return her rings. Stillman was seething inside at the audacity of Miller's comments, but he kept his calm demeanor. He leaned forward when he next spoke. Seth, you and I both know your client deliberately broke her marriage vows with Corey Parker. She knew her actions could ruin my client's emotional well-being and jeopardize his business partnership. That's why they staged a major cover-up to keep my client unaware. Her actions were cruel and heartless. If you want to present this case to Judge Landis, go ahead. I'd be happy to challenge you in her courtroom. To be honest, counselor, you have no case. Your client has cheated and lied. We have a lot of evidence, and while we don't want to, we'll make it all public at trial if you try to cause more harm to my client. If I don't hear from you by noon on Tuesday, the offer will be off the table. Then we'll see you in court. Moore was frustrated, but even he knew that Stillman had the upper hand. This settlement was a good deal for him. He'd make $10,000 before taxes, which was more than he usually earned in 2 months. Unless there's anything else, Stillman said as he stood up and buttoned his jacket. I think we should give the Bentons a few minutes for a private talk. Moore stood up and shook Ed's hand. We'll be in touch, was all he said. Ed shook Moore's hand and then went to the men's room to wash his own. Will and Ellie were left alone. Ed had advised Will to remain silent and let Ellie speak first, as he was the one who had been wronged. Once the lawyers had left and the door was closed, there was a tense silence. Will looked at Ellie, who was staring at the floor. Finally, Ellie spoke. I don't have any excuses, Will. If I could undo everything, I would. My actions have hurt you deeply, and I will have to live with that for the rest of my life. Apologizing or saying it was just act would only make things worse, but I want you to know how devastated I am by how badly I've treated you. Believe what you want, Ellie. It doesn't matter to me, Will responded. Ellie continued. Is there any chance for us, Will? Do you think that with counseling we could work things out? I don't want a divorce. I never did. I'm willing to do anything you ask. I just want us to stay together. Will was struggling to keep his emotions in check. She had already taken everything and now wanted more, all at his expense. Ellie, if the court orders counseling, I'll go, he said. This gave Ellie a glimmer of hope, but know this. I have no desire to be with you again. I loved you and gave you everything, my heart, mind, and soul. You repaid me by sleeping with my former best friend. I don't even recognize you anymore, except as someone who betrayed me. I would never be with you again, and there's no way I'd ever have children with you. You want my forgiveness, but you destroyed any chance of that when you so willingly and frequently betrayed me with Corey. Ellie went pale at his words. Will, do you really hate me that much? Yes, Ellie. Today I do. Your question just shows how self-centered you are. I'm focused on moving past my feelings for you as quickly as possible. I plan to care nothing about you. No love, no pity, nothing. I want to stop thinking about you entirely. You're not worth the hurt. I've given you countless kisses and years of my life. I trusted you completely, and you took everything. You'll figure things out, whether you end up on your feet or on your back, but it won't be with me. You'll have your horses and your lover. That should be enough for you. Ellie tried a few more tactics. She offered unlimited closeness, promised never to see Corey again, and even suggested counseling to understand her choices, but none of it made a difference. After another 30 minutes, the conversation ended. Will you walk me to my car? Just one last moment together? She asked. Walk yourself out, Ellie, or call Corey to come pick you up and go back to him. I'm done. Will stood up to leave, but turned back with one last remark. We had everything, Ellie, and you threw it all away. I have to give Corey credit. He must be really something. In the days that followed, Seth Moore tried to get Ed Simmons to ease up on the divorce demands, but Simmons was unyielding and eventually stopped taking his calls. As the Tuesday deadline approached, Ellie realized she had little chance of getting more than what Will offered. Corey called her on Monday, and desperate for affection, she agreed to meet at his condo. She stayed the night, and they had closeness several times. Simmons had an investigator stationed outside, who recorded her leaving in the morning looking disheveled. The evidence was handed over to Simmons. Later, reviewing the footage, Ed muttered, No one can be this stupid. Ellie returned to her rented one-room apartment and called Moore, telling him to accept the divorce petition as it was. When he tried to argue, she hung up. At the initial hearing, Judge Landis lived up to her tough reputation, thoroughly questioning both sides. Moore struggled, while Simmons was well prepared with solid evidence. Judge Landis asked both Will and Ellie many questions, with Will well prepared and Ellie not. At the end of the hearing, Judge Landis said, "The evidence in this case seems overwhelming. I will take a couple of months to review everything and might contact both attorneys with more questions. If I do, I expect prompt responses. Is that understood?" Both lawyers agreed with the judge. Landis had a busy schedule, so it took 3 months before she called everyone back for the final decision. Based on the evidence, it's clear that this case is about straightforward infidelity. There are usually two sides to every troubled marriage, but Mrs. Benton, I can't understand why you left your husband for Mr. Parker. I hear that Mr. Parker sold his share of the business for a fraction of its value, which confirms my view. Normally, I'd order counseling, but Mrs. Benton's betrayal seems to make any chance of fixing things impossible. Mrs. Benton, I strongly suggest you reflect on your choices and work towards a better life on your own. The divorce petition from Mr. Benton is approved, and the marriage is officially ended. This court case is now closed. There were no celebrations on Will's side of the courtroom. Will and Ed shook hands quietly. Seth Moore quickly left, leaving Ellie alone at the table. Ellie got up and exited the courtroom by herself. Will started his new life as a single man, feeling hurt, but knowing he wasn't alone. 5 months after the divorce, Corey had an accident. He fell down 3 flights of stairs while coming out of his condo. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital. At the time of the fall, his blood alcohol level was 0.15, nearly double the legal limit, and he didn't remember the accident. His insurance had expired while he was job hunting, so his hospital bills wiped out all his savings. Will found out about the accident while on a road trip through Smoky Mountain National Park and thought, couldn't happen to a nicer guy. The police found out that earlier that night, Corey had been with Ellie Shriver. Detectives learned they were having an affair, and Corey was also seeing someone else. Ellie was charged with aggravated assault and sentenced to 3 years in prison. It was a rough experience for her. Corey still walks with a significant limp and works as tech support for a local junior college.